Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Laura Mullen, and on behalf of ACRL and Choice, I'd like to welcome you to today's program, Buy Less and Sell More, New Roles for Libraries and Librarians, sponsored by Springer and featuring Mark Sandler from the CIC and Bob Boise from Springer. Today's discussion is one in a series of sponsored webinars from ACRL and Choice that addresses new ideas, developments, and products of interest to the academic library community. Free to users, these structured 60-minute live presentations provide the opportunity for interactive discussions of important new issues and developments in academic librarianship by librarians, vendors, authors, and other interested stakeholders. Before we get started, I'd like to point out a few features of the webinar software. In the main area of the screen, you can follow along with the presentation materials. Along the left-hand side, you will also see a Q&A panel that you can use to submit questions or comments. We'll spend some time responding to your questions during the program, so please feel free to submit these throughout. And finally, please note that today's program will be recorded and all registrants will receive follow-up instructions on accessing the archived version. Our featured speakers today are Mark Sandler and Bob Boise, and here to introduce them is Christy Showers, who serves as Product Marketing Manager, Americas at Springer. Christy?
Thanks, Laura, and again, welcome everyone. We're excited to have Mark Sandler, Director of the Center for Library Initiatives at the Committee on Institutional Cooperation, the CIC, here with us today to speak about new approaches to library marketing. Mark was a founder of the Text Creation Partnership and has worked closely with the Google Books Project and the HathiTrust Digital Library. In recent years, he's paid greater attention to the business culture of libraries, including their marketing, sales, and promotional cultures. This past fall, he published an invited op-ed piece in Choice, focusing on what libraries might learn from business practices for customer acquisition. Also presenting with Mark today is Bob Boise. Bob is Manager of Account Development and Strategic Alliances at Springer and has previously held positions in library licensing and third-party licensing at Springer. He has also worked in training, client technical support, and data exchange services for a subscription agency. Bob has been involved in many standards groups related to serials and has served as president of NASIG. At this point, we're ready to get started, so over to you, Mark and Bob.
Thank you very much, Christy, and hello to everyone. Thank you all for joining us. I'll say you all look great, but I'm really just kidding because we can't see you, maybe. So, I'm trying to get control of the slides. Let's see if there you go. As Christy said, I'm Mark Sandler. I'm the director for the Center for Library Initiatives within the Committee on Institutional Cooperation, or the CIC, and that's a consortium of top-tier research universities in the Midwestern and Northeastern U.S. And for those of you who follow collegiate sports, our universities comprise the 14 universities of the Big Ten Conference, with the University of Chicago, which was a founding member of the Big Ten, by the way, now on the sidelines athletically, but cheering on their CIC compatriots. And I'll also say that for those of you who follow collegiate sports, you should hang up right now and start watching the NCAA tournament. So if you caught the names of some of our schools from the last slide, you'll recognize that many of them are in small agricultural communities in the U.S. heartland. And that's not unusual. As U.S. higher education took root in the mid-19th century, founders everywhere were seeking cheap land in relatively remote and isolated or cloistered locations. So, for instance, I'm speaking to you today from CIC headquarters, which is in Champaign, Illinois, in shouting distance from the University of Illinois campus, which literally boasts a cornfield, the Morrow plot, adjacent to the library. Now, for some of you, though, cornfields are not part of your environment. So for those of you in the southeast, you know, maybe it's the mangrove forests, and you have sort of universities hidden in those roots and trees, or in those of you calling in from the southwest, probably sitting on top of mesas somewhere in the middle of the desert, or if you're up in the Pacific Northwest, you know, you may be sitting in the middle of some redwood forest somewhere. So the landscape may change, but that notion of isolation is probably my starting point for talking this morning. So what happened in you know, in a quick way is that these universities and libraries, for all intents and purposes, discovered what we call the middle of nowhere. And once they had that couple of acres of land, the provost sent over money to bring Shakespeare or Homer or whoever to the prairies or the swamps. And vendors were attracted to those unlikely piles of cash that appeared like a mirage in the middle of the desert, and eventually farmers or ranchers or alligator wrestlers or lumberjacks or lobster fishermen or you know, whatever's native to your area, you know, maybe sent their kids off to read and learn at these schools. So in these relatively isolated communities with limited options for travel or communication, it's not surprising that libraries would become inward-looking, emphasizing local practice and convincing themselves, and if they were lucky, their campuses or their provosts of their biblio-exceptionalism. And, you know, in fact, you know, I'd probably say that the most exceptional thing about these places is not their efficiency or their management acumen or effectiveness. It's most likely the breadth and heft and scale of their collections and operations. To a very great extent, size mattered a great deal in this model, and it crowds out competition, and some would say it also undermines responsiveness to user needs. So again, because I can't really see you all, I'm not sure how many of you might be old enough to remember Ernestine, played by Lily Tomlin, the condescending telephone operator from Saturday Night Live. Well, as Ernestine said about AT&T, this was back in the mid-'70s when AT&T was like a real monopoly still. She said, our system consists of a multi-billion-dollar matrix of space-age technology, so sophisticated even we can't handle it. But that's your problem, isn't it? And I don't know if anyone wants to admit that you know, sometimes sounds all too true for our libraries as well. And she goes on to say in true monopolistic fashion, we don't care, we don't have to, we're the phone company. Well, we all know now that AT&T eventually lost its stranglehold over the telecommunications market, and nobody, maybe other than with the exception of shareholders, you know, shed a lot of tears about that. The market changed dramatically. The telecommunications environment changed dramatically. New players popped up, and names that we hardly ever heard of were suddenly buying companies that were iconic brands. So it was a very interesting time through the 80s and particularly in the 90s in that space. For monopolies, obviously, size matters, and I want to talk about this Gumball Machine image, but you'll notice that we just popped up a poll on the top of the screen. And we're going to ask you to take 30 seconds or so to just respond to these 2 questions. And then we're going to steal them away from you for a while, and I'll come back to them toward the end of the presentation, and we can sort of talk about what we're getting there. So take a look at these 2 questions and take your best guess at an answer. Thanks. Okay, we all set? Hey, I'm going to go again. So I like this Gumball machine. Firstly, it's visual, reinforcement of this idea about how much emphasis we place on size in research libraries, and the extent to how important those size metrics have been in ranking and judging these libraries over the years. But for a couple of other reasons, I like this image. One, I sometimes refer to it as a reverse vending machine, where vendors can come and dump in shiny baubles and turn the crank and cash comes out. So, we certainly know that's part of this relationship that we're in. And secondly, I think many of our libraries function like these sort of gumball machines at the mall, where they're strategically located and passively available, right? No one's shouting out at you. No one's trying to bring you in. You just notice them, and maybe you come up and put in a nickel or a quarter. So they offer up an undifferentiated mass of content, and you're just sort of welcome to step up and take your chances. Maybe you'll get the color gumball that you were hoping for, or maybe you'll get something else that's close enough to chew on. And sometimes that resonates with me as to how many of our users interact with our libraries. And finally, also maybe more on point for today, it reminds me that most of the content in Gumball machines and, in fact, libraries is invisible. The stuff on the top, the last in, is visible, and to some extent, almost at random, some of the older stuff that happens to be along the glass remains visible to users. But there's a big core of stuff in the middle that just can't be seen. And while some of our libraries are very good about promoting their latest acquisitions, that layer on the top, they actually, we have few strategies. We do little collectively as a community, I would argue, to go circle back and promote older acquisitions. So here we are. I mentioned universities in the middle of nowhere, libraries to some extent in the middle of nowhere, and supporting families, householders, it also out in the middle of nowhere. So you have this sort of monopoly structure where if you're a settler on the frontier, little house on the prairie, you kind of depend on single source suppliers for just about everything. The general store that would have food or farm equipment, or, one shoe store, one place, one blacksmith, or one provider for tools or fuel or news, one newspaper, or one school available at whatever level, and one library available. So when it comes to market dynamics in these kinds of areas where many of our universities chose to locate, it's just not a very competitive landscape, or at least traditionally it hasn't been. But now introduce the internet into that equation, early 90s, later 90s, and the effects of geography and geographic determinism are modulated by these new modes of telecommunication. And suddenly the landscape becomes much more competitive for libraries and others. So Amazon can reach that householder now. Google can reach that householder and provide the equivalent of reference services as well as content in many cases. The Wikipedia certainly competing as an information source, or a publisher like Springer, which has the opportunity to reach end users directly and compete for those users that used to depend almost exclusively on their library, be that a campus library or a public library. So we've come to a point with the advent of the internet where the campus library is no longer holds that monopoly and ultimately needs to fight for the affection of their students and faculty and needs to, as it says here, woo them and court them and caress the ones that show up, much, much more attentive to actually acquiring and retaining customers and users in our libraries. Now, I know that people say they love libraries, but as Paul Simon pointed out, there are 50 ways to leave your lover. And we can imagine lots of ways that users, now we can imagine lots of ways that users can gain access to what was traditionally considered library content. So just, off the top of my head here, for example, we could certainly see Google, which has digitized probably at this point 30 million volumes from libraries around the world, in addition to the publisher relationships that they maintain with most scholarly and trade and popular publishers. Google could certainly provide library content to users if they chose to go down that path. Amazon, who doesn't love getting Amazon boxes and downloading books on Kindles and other things, so Amazon could move into that space. JSTOR could actually become a more customer direct delivery service, and has brought up some services now that allows independent scholars and others to access their database. They could sort of move into that space and compete for the traditional campus library user. I can envision a central industry site like Chorus among the STM publishers developing some capacity to reach users directly. Deep Dive, HathiTrust, peer-to-peer file sharing, lots and lots of ways we can envision that users could now get access to content without necessarily having it mediated by libraries. And, if you can think of those ways, and I can think of those ways, well, certainly publishers and campus administrators and others could also, start to be more aware of that. So again, going back to the Paul Simon thing, if it turns out that it is in fact or perceived to be there are alternatives that are more efficient for users or more cost-effective for provosts or more profitable for vendors, you can be sure that campus libraries will become jilted lovers. So the challenge, to my mind, is that libraries actually need to be, given the new environment that they're in, a more competitive landscape, need to be much more attentive to their outreach strategies to users, much more committed to turning non-users into users on their campus, and turning those people who are users into super users or more frequent users. That ultimately every staff member needs to be committed to that endeavor of sort of building up their commitments from the campus community. So interestingly to me, that's a particular challenge on a campus because turnover rates on campus are actually higher than they would be in most communities, or the problem that most retailers face of how do I replace a customer who moved out of state or died or whatever. And that rate tends to be something like 10 to 15% a year, whereas on a campus it's about 25% or 30% a year with graduation and tenure review and some other things. Campus turnover is actually quite high. So this problem of recruiting new users is one that libraries need to be all over and need to be quite aggressive about in terms of building strategies. And like any other business, need to know something about I will say toward this end that libraries make a big investment in supporting a cadre of folks who are out there trying to win over users and potential users and talking about library services and talking about content and what the library can do for them. And whether they're called selectors or subject specialists or liaisons or outreach librarians, we have various labels for this. But most libraries, and certainly most research libraries, are paying a steep price to build a cadre of people to do this work. And while this slide undoubtedly appears like mean-spirited to compare our outreach librarians to the more amateurish Girl Scout cookie sellers, it's really not my point here. I would say selectors and subject specialists are interesting people and committed people, and some of the most fun people to talk to in the library. What I'm really taking a shot at here is not the liaisons, but at the library directors, because of course library directors are always fair game, and they have tough skin, so they take it in stride. And other library administrators, I think my point here is not that the selectors aren't doing a good job, but that the library is not doing a good job of actually structuring their work. That we owe those selectors more clarity about what it is we want them to accomplish or deliver, and more structure in which to help them succeed. To do their work. So I would say that what's needed are measurable goals. What do we want those users and non-users to do? Do we want them to come in? Do we want them to sign up for classes? Do we want them to assign their students things? Do we want them to just check out 10 Springer articles a week? What's the actual goal? What can we measure, and what can we push them to be doing? We need librarians who can and will spend more of their time and effort thinking about how to promote what it is they've purchased and the services that they're providing. Managers who can hire and train and assess these outreach librarians. Tools to track and monitor and measure the inputs and outcomes, something that would look a little bit like Salesforce.com in a business environment, but ultimately gives us some opportunity to stay on top of what it is users are saying to these folks and the kind of work that they're doing. Incentives for success and failure, and always, I guess, more of a sense of urgency that this is something that is not just some long 5-year, 10-year, 20-year idea, but that actually, like any business, we need to start bringing in people to this week, this month, this year, figuring out how to actually increase our connections. So I guess I would say that I'm pretty convinced. I don't know if I would convince any of you that library messaging really shouldn't be about books or the organization of the library or preservation or all the things that we like to talk about and hang posters about in the library. That ultimately the real focus needs to be on user aspirations. that the to that end, the library message actually should be a pretty easy sell. We have the stuff you need on a campus library, and it's free. And that's a really unusual opportunity, sales opportunity. It's free. So compare this to trying to sell, for instance, people on a gym membership. And I believe there's something like the last time I looked, 62 million people in the U.S. that have gym memberships now. It's a very fast-growing sector of the economy. And that strikes me as a very hard sell. Come on in and sweat, come in and strain, come in and feel publicly insecure about your body or your physical shortcomings, come and shower in public. It's not immediately clear to me how you'd get 60 people to plunk down $100 a month for a gym membership, no less 60 million. So the magic sauce there, in the way that the secret to that messaging is gyms don't attract customers by talking about the equipment and the exercise. They attract them by talking about looking better, feeling fit, living longer. And those are near universal aspirations. So as messaging goes, I like to say we need to be marketing to the insecurities of our customers. So, and by that I mean if you think about those annoying commercials, I've fallen and I can't get up, that is addressing, of the fears of TV viewers in the middle of the night, a fear that old people have about their frailty and isolation. What if I fall? Who would help me? Or the fear that their adult kids have, who, think they're, well, maybe I'm not doing enough to support mom or support dad, and maybe I should be going over there, I should be calling more or whatever. Somehow I'm trying to attach yourselves, and within the academic community, obviously, everyone undoubtedly feels somewhat intimidated by, the person sitting next to them, whether that's a faculty member or a student, and everyone feels like they may be falling short. They want to get smarter, they want to get A's, they want to finish their dissertation, they want to get it published, they want to get tenure. Lots of insecurity in the community that, we need to be understanding and addressing to really talk to people's aspirations as opposed to what it is we do in the library every day. So I would say that libraries could learn valuable lessons from other industries, retail and service industries alike. I have here the Cosmetic Counter. I like this idea of making the library the Cosmetic Counter of the campus. They occupy in department stores and malls some of the most valuable real estate. And I believe in those cases, it's not really the stuff that allows them to get a hold on that prime space, because that's readily available on the internet or CVS. It's really the service and the people that they put out there. The idea that that folks feel insecure about their looks and feel insecure about their ability to apply makeup or pick the right makeup to do that, and you have these experts who are willing to sit with you and work through your particular problem, bad coloring, large pores, whatever that is, and actually teach you how to address that. I ultimately think that's the secret sauce there. And ultimately, that is, I think, what's going to attract people to libraries as well, our ability to put out folks who have particular expertise and who are willing to work in high-touch services with the user community. So to switch to a different retail setting, there's a concept in telecommunications called dumb pipe, where providers like AT&T or Sprint or cable companies or whatever just supply conduit through which other services like Netflix or Amazon or Google actually can develop interesting products and sell their wares to users. And it's considered dumb pipe is a bad place to be. It's a marginalized, commoditized service. And, everyone wants to be in that direct relationship with the customer, not just the pass-through. And we're seeing some changes in the industry where folks are doing creative programming now and doing other things to get into that space. So if you think of supermarkets, and I don't know if Kroger is in the areas where you're calling in from, but whether it's Safeway or Publix or Albertsons, it's the same. The traditional market has been really that kind of pass-through where national brands like Kellogg or Kraft Macaroni and Cheese or Doritos or whatever would use those as distribution points, use those markets as distribution points. And the markets had very low margins. The manufacturers, the product developers, actually marketed directly through TV ads and magazines ads and others to families. So, it was their brand that really counted, and the market was just a place to go and pick it up and pay for it and park your car while you were there. So, but most of the value was coming in the brand. If you compare that now to some of the new markets out there like Whole Food, that's really changed a lot. Um, uh, Much higher end service there, specialty brands, local brands, things that you've never really heard of often, look interesting, people in the store willing to talk to you about it. And ultimately, it's the store that's conveying value to the inventory, and you're trusting the store's selection more than what you're sort of seeing as a label on the products you're buying. So you have these two very different models, and I would say there's some analogy there to libraries. For the most part, we spend our time in libraries um, as a pass-through for, you see that Springer horse on the top there, and I'm just using Springer because I'm partnering with Bob here today. But, that could be Elsevier or Wiley or Nature. But you have these sort of nationally branded publications and products and all, and libraries are the medium for distributing those. So they're just, in this case, a convenient way to allow users to access that material. But there's all this other opportunity now for scholarly information to move and be shared, data and um, uh, presentations at conferences and TED Talks and things, blogging and certainly Twitter and Facebook and other ways that scholars are connecting and communicating and talking. All of which are an opportunity really for libraries to organize, collect, and really add value in spaces where there isn't really organization and there really isn't a convenient strategy for access currently in place. So there is opportunity for us to sort of think about that Kroger versus Whole Food strategy and think about whether libraries shouldn't be investing more in giving more shelf space and attention to some of these other media by which scholars are communicating. So just some quick summary comments here about cleaning house. As the title of this program conveyed, more attention to converting librarians from buyers of stuff into sellers and promoters of their content and services. And to do this, we think there's great opportunity to enlist the help of your suppliers, and I know Bob's going to talk about this in his remarks, that this is really common ground, that the publishers care every bit as much as libraries about upping the use of their material and would be very co-invested in working with their library colleagues on making that happen. Making yourself irresistible to users, sort of the Cosmetic Counter analogy, replacing so-called local knowledge with data-driven user profiling and much more sort of national understanding of user communities than thinking that every individual campus has a idiosyncratic user community that they have to go out and discover on their own. Rethinking what the skills and training for librarians, given new environments and opportunities. Working again on that messaging about ensuring that campus constituents achieve their academic goals, and ultimately enrolling members or fans or people who are part and parcel of the library community and rewarding that loyalty just like most retailers do. So let's see how this poll turned out here. Looks like not so many A's in terms of what grade you would give your library on its efforts to convey its value to the campus. B's and C's, but no F's, which is good. And I do know that every library is very, very cognizant of the importance of this now. Everyone's working on this issue about conveying value. And the second question about how important users might think the library is in this day and age. Again, not so many essentials, but lots and lots of importance. And I'm going to take you at your word for that, and I'm going to say that's encouraging. And I'm guessing you're right on that. And then some of the of limited importance, about 25%. And I don't know about you all, but we watch closely those polls that S&R or the Ithaca folks do every couple of years with faculty about whether the library is their starting place for research and how much they rely on the library catalog versus other discovery sources. So again, there's a lot of attention in the library community toward these issues. So I think I'm going to wrap up and just say that I had a chance to visit a library in Portugal this year at the University of Coimbra, which is an incredibly old university, I think right from, maybe second to the Sorbonne in terms of, it's a 13th century university. And they had this library, which is pictured here, which is this beautiful gilded room, but ultimately, it's a tourist attraction. It's not a working library. They sell tickets. You can walk through. You can sort of marvel at both the beauty of the space and the nice leather bindings on the books on the shelves and all. And it's a great reminder of just how important libraries have been historically and culturally, and how much we revere them and enjoy working with them, and how much our users and communities love and revere their libraries. But ultimately, times actually wash away a whole lot of revered institutions, and we have to be careful not to just rest on our laurels and take for granted that we will be there forever. Obviously, we need to keep I am going to turn it over to Bob.
All right. I'll advance here. Okay, so hello everyone. My name is Bob Boise, and as manager of account development for Springer, and I'm in charge of all our post-purchase implementation support, education, and promotional cooperations with libraries in the Americas. We currently have 6 dedicated account development staff in the Americas serving government and academic accounts. My own region of responsibility is accounts in the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast U.S. We also have account development staff throughout the rest of the world. There's a web link to our full contacts list on your screen, as well as a link to our marketing and education tools for librarians. You notice that I titled my part of it, the last part of this theme of selling more. The buying less part was a little tough for the bosses, but here we go with selling more. Our theme today is taking a sales and marketing approach to library work. In keeping with the theme, I lay out here some of the more traditional marketing methods aimed at raising visibility of a product or service. Unfortunately, I must say we've been told by library marketing specialists in numerous brainstorming sessions over recent years that a lot of these methods are only minimally effective. The events can be effective, but tend to be time-consuming and expensive to manage, and they definitely require food if you want an audience. I am personally a fan of white papers because people who make decisions are familiar with the format, and short papers require a kind of ruthless whittling down of evidence, best practice, and quantification to make a clear point, but white papers are only good for certain kinds of messages to certain kinds of audiences. I must admit a lot of traditional marketing suffers from information overload, spam fears, and also a kind of a passive approach. So we move over now to what I'll call new age marketing. Newer marketing ideas attempt to understand the rhythms of user attention and behavior and fit in with lifestyle and preferences. Marketing is more and more done in an indirect fashion, with the receivers of the marketing message getting something of value to offset the value of their time and attention. For casual ease of use, there are social media and short video forms. For assessment, publishers like Springer offer standard account reviews to pick apart usage behavior. Some reasonably new ideas come in the form of author events, where we introduce prospective authors to the methods by which publishing is done. We always make sure those events are hosted by the library. And a highly targeted table of contents alert campaigns are also effective. For example, when I talk about table of contents alerts, if the top 10 journals used on a campus are in engineering and biomedicine, we're going to look to target graduate students in those areas and let them know these are the top journals used on their campus, and that they might want to sign up for a table of contents alert in order to stay current with their peers. Recently, we've also been sponsoring survey research done out of the library on various campuses, because we think every survey raises visibility of resources, especially new ones. All right, so we'll move over to account development, what my group does in particular. There you see some folks wearing Go Ask a Librarian t-shirts at the University of Scranton, the picture. At Springer, you can call our outreach a form of marketing or a form of support or a service, but it's all done in pursuit of optimizing the use and usefulness of the information resources that we license. To offer customer service, we need to get to know the library through its website, personal visits, and quantitative analysis of user behavior. My point is that great marketing requires literally stepping into the shoes of the people to whom you market. I imagine any librarian who has taken a course at their own campus has gained a better notion of what library services need marketing. So I want to talk a little bit about discovery, because my intention here is to kind of complement what Mark said about libraries. We have a little bit of poll coming up to talk about how much you think you need to be tweaking your Webscale Discovery tools, if you have one. If you don't have Webscale Discovery, consider it other tools that you might have that are serving in that role. But I do want to tell you a little bit about what we do with Discovery. Our position, my position that I'm leading the company in 2015, is that the library engineered discovery environment, including Webscale Discovery systems, do work, and they work well. Partially because publishers like Springer have worked very hard with these services to share full text, metadata, and consortium and package holdings in standard formats on a timely basis. Elise, pictured here, Elise Sasson and Noah Levin are two of the parties that are responsible for this activity at Springer. And of course, the discovery services vendors have worked very hard to improve the depth and breadth of their indexing and the quality of their ranking options. So the issue is getting students, faculty, and all researchers to actually use these systems. I mentioned at a local ER&L conference that maybe a shortcut to the library homepage on the desktop of all freshman computers would not be too bold an idea. I know it sounds naive, but when businesses give computers to new employees, they sure tailor the applications that go on that computer to the goals of the company. So here I'm going to start getting into some data. Yeah, we can go back to the poll a little bit later. So this is worldwide visits to Springer by the top 10 referring sites. Springer uses web analytics to look at macro effects like this listing of worldwide referrals to the Springer content platform for the most recent full year. It's 2014. What we see here are visits to the Springer content platform, not downloads. The Springer platform services several 100 million downloads a year and is one of the 2,000 busiest sites in the world. So this chart has an extremely long tail that is not showing here. But from what we can see, Springer gets almost 25% of its traffic from the direct category, which I call social use of people sharing URLs, bookmarking, etc. Google search for all types of content and Google Scholar search for journal content is clearly important for linking to Springer content, as is the fourth-ranked PubMed. There are a series of non-US Google search sites in the top 10 as well as Springer's own corporate site. Many users will start on Springer.com and then follow links over to link.springer.com for the full-text content. When we look at worldwide data from all visitors to Springer like this, remember this includes corporate, end users, government, anybody coming to Springer Link. We actually don't see any library-engineered sources in the top 10, though you could make an argument for PubMed link-out service. I'll move on, because that doesn't tell the whole story, not by a long shot. Digging deeper, we will look at one school, University of Denver, as a case study. Chris Brown from the university presented some of this data with me at the most recent Charleston conference. This university has about 11,500 FTE, and we can see a typical journal peak use in April and October, which is the mid-semester timing that you would expect. Downloads are varying quite a bit, between 1,000 and 4,000 a month. Here we see e-book use varying between 2,000 and 5,000 chapter downloads a month, with the general increase after July 2013 when Springer introduced the one-click download of entire books. Both eJournal and ebook use is robust for the size and type of this school. Now here comes the slide that I want to talk about in a little bit more depth. Here are the referring sources during the same period as the usage data. The reason I use Denver as a case study is not because they are typical in their referral pattern, but because at this time they stand out. Firstly, you see direct traffic is the top single referrer at University of Denver. Direct, as I said before, means someone clicked on a URL, could have been on a course management site, a syllabus, maybe in an email from a colleague or instructor, or perhaps a table of contents alert, or they could have bookmarked the site or just know about link.springer.com. We think of direct use as a kind of social use, as many times someone has put a URL out there for someone else to use. But that is not the big deal. The big deal is looking at the long-term data. In this long-term data is that the 5 library-engineered discovery sources, if you look closely at spots 2, 4, 6, 7, and 8, come in at over 40% of the traffic, while the 3 Google sources in spots 3, 5, and 10 come in with just 26%, a little bit over 26% of the traffic. I think spot 10 is a Scholar button University of Denver manages, so I'm not even sure I would count it on the Google side. But this proves that library-managed discovery can play a lead role in driving traffic to pre-selected licensed e-resources. I have seen over 2 years of web analytics for other academic campuses. I'll refer to those without medical schools that show that Google Scholar, and Direct can carry almost 70 to 75% of the traffic, and library-engineered tools more often get 25 to 30% of the traffic. That's what makes University of Denver stand out a little bit. When there is a medical school attached to the campus, PubMed is inevitably 1, 2, or 3 in the referring sources. So the University of Denver has successfully moved Google tools off the front burner and moved the additive effect of their own discovery service up the ladder. How did they do this? Well, combination. Web design, putting that search service front and center, promotion, bibliographic instruction, manipulating the parameters on the discovery service, and just plain old finding ways to get people to use their discovery tools. Webscale Discovery services work well now, and the emphasis on academic campuses must shift to active promotion of these discovery services. I am advocating that discovery services need to be sold. Now, you might ask why Springer cares where the referrals come from, as long as the traffic and downloads stay high. The answer to that is that according to a recent large-scale research program that we conducted with one major consortium in the United States, we have seen that visits from library tools drive more downloads per visit, fewer denials per visit, longer duration visits, and more downloads per minute of the visits. Simply stated, visits from library tools have more impact on usage and deliver a better user experience. Now there's just a couple of slides here of questions that I'd like you to consider as we head into our Q&A period. Consider, for example, if you knew the top 10 most used journals on your campus, would you be willing to try to sign up grad students or undergrad students for table of contents alerts to get them going in their career? We talked the business of that we did the poll on before. I think we want to consider how much manipulation of the discovery service do you need to do to make it successful. Would you look on favorably if a publisher or vendor said we would help you sponsor a library user needs or preferences survey? Again, partially to drive visibility. And the last questions to think about. Just kind of consider what actual aggressive marketing activities you undertake on a regular basis versus one of those kind of ad hoc projects that you sometimes do. What is the ratio of systematic to ad hoc efforts that you make with marketing? Also think about things like an author event to bring prospective authors on your campus who are trying to do things, as Mark said, achieve a higher status, achieve tenure and all that. Do they need some help with an author event by popular publishers? Finally, if a major publisher like Springer could sponsor a white paper directed to your school's administration, what kind of topic would you like us to address? What kind of research would you like us to do? Okay, now I'll turn it back over to Christy for our question and answer session.
Thanks, Bob, and thanks, Mark, for those great presentations. A lot of really good food for thought, and I myself went to a university, one of those universities in the cornfields, so I always like to hear more about it. So now we have just a few minutes for a Q&A, so please feel free to submit your questions for our speakers. And it looks like we have something here, at least a comment here. Okay, so for Mark, one of the things you touched on was about the measurable goals, and could you give us some examples of what some good maybe groundwork for measurable goals would be that you'd want to see from users and non-users, maybe as a starting point as libraries look at implementing some of these things that you talked about?
Sure. I guess, if, for example, if a library is buying German language Springer journals, or I guess ebooks as well, and is committed to that because of historical reasons or because they believe that this is an area of some attention on their campus or some interest on their campus, or, they're the only library in the country that's invested in doing this at that level. It seems to me that there ought to be some consideration of saying, well, our goal is to, drive up the use of that content by 2% a year or 5% a year or 1% a year. It's not like in any business environment, no one goes out of business overnight and no one makes $1 billion overnight. It's always very incremental. Sales were up 1.5% over last holiday season, or, sales dropped off on Black Friday after Thanksgiving. So I guess I'm looking at that kind of measurable outcomes when it comes to collection use, use of special collections material, on-site library use, as well as remote use, and also much more attention to the kind of traction that the services the library is offering or getting, and how to promote those services, how to capture people who may just be walking through the library because there's a coffee shop or because there's a beanbag chairs that they can sleep in the basement or something like that. But, you grab their attention as they're walking from the door to that beanbag chair or from the door to the bathroom? How do you grab their attention and sort of drive them to a writing center or a academic success center or a math lab or some other services that the library is trying to promote? So I guess it's that kind of just much more intentional effort to promote resources and services and measure whether or not we're being effective in our marketing strategies.
Right. So something really obtainable, and maybe something simple around usage, and then building out sort of 3 or 4 goals from there that are driven towards usage. And Bob, maybe you can jump in here too with this and sort of address how your team would really help a library with that task of driving up usage if the goal by 1 or 2%. So I think what you sort of talked about was really in line with a library working on an outreach goal like that.
Sure, I can address that. I'm not going to give the super obvious answer, which is, we're just going to simply look at after you do an ebooks promotion to your users selected group that we then just look at the usage 6 months before and 6 months after. I like to do other methods because a lot of times direct promotions are not particularly preferred on campuses. I refer to survey research, and we've sponsored a number of different surveys on campuses now, and I do look at usage of particular resources before and after survey is done, like, for example, ebook as a format. And I do see that in more cases than not, usage of ebooks does take a nice jump up after we do a survey. It also is nice. Not all campuses are aware that libraries are doing research, and some libraries do it regularly, others don't. So we like the idea of sponsoring research. We do all kinds of web analytics for libraries. So the things that I showed you about University of Denver in terms of driving more users to certain things, that's not the kind of web analytics that a library can do just by doing Google Analytics on its own website. You need to enlist your vendors to give you some deeper analytics about how people are getting to their content. For example, how people get to Springer STM content might be very different than how they're getting to, let's say, a more humanities or social science-oriented publisher. But you should look to your vendors to provide you with good quantitative analysis of how your different efforts that you might make in different directions are resulting in usage or more desired behaviors. Like I suggested, desired behavior would be using the library tools. In particular, one last point is in this 175 school study that we did, Google and Google Scholar together were driving over 75% of the denials, which I call disappointments, to our site, and that's one of the reasons why we want more library tools in place and being promoted.
Thanks, Bob. I just, we ran a little short on time for questions. We hope you guys really enjoyed the presentation, and we want to invite you guys to reach out to us with any questions you may have at libraryrelations@springer.com. And if you just want to mention the choice webinar in the subject line, we would be happy to field any further questions you may have that you didn't get a chance to have answered today. So with that, I'd like to turn things back over to Laura. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, Christy, and thanks to Mark and Bob. I'd like to give you all a virtual round of applause for spending time with us today and sharing some really great info. We appreciate all of your insights. Just a reminder, we have recorded today's program, so be on the lookout for a follow-up email from ACRL and Choice that includes instructions on accessing the archived version. Thanks again to all of you who joined us today. I hope you enjoyed the session. Please enjoy the rest of your day.